Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our second virtual town hall meeting. The purpose for these meetings is really to have an open forum discussion with residents and be able to answer your questions on a variety of topics. Our first town hall was regarding resident services, and we had Ann Matola, our Director of Community Services, with us. Today's focus is on Mutual Operations Division, and it would have been nice to have Yurun Wright, our Director of Mutual Operations, with us today, but unfortunately he couldn't be here. So we do have a wonderful group with with us today. We have Sophia Genovi, who is our Business Operations Manager, John Tausch-DeJerna, our Landscape Manager, and fairly new to Rossmore and Golden Rain Foundation, Todd Otterburn, our new CFO. And of course, my name is Jeff Matheson. I'm the General Manager for Golden Rain Foundation. Before we dive right into questions, I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview of Mutual Operations Division. Rossmore could be kind of a challenging place to keep track of all of the different divisions and organizations within Rossmore. Rossmore really contains three organizations. One, certainly the mutuals. There's 23 mutuals, and those are the homeowner associations where all of the residential units are. Those are distinct and independent corporations. They have their own boards of directors. They have their own rules and bylaws that they follow. There is then the Golden Rain Foundation, which is the trustee of the Golden Rain Foundation Trust. As the trustee, the Golden Rain Foundation is responsible for the maintenance and operation and program delivery for all of the property that is not dedicated or not part of a mutual. So that includes the recreation department, the bus service, the golf, the fitness center, streets and roads, all of the amenities. That is Golden Rain Foundation. Part of Golden Rain Foundation, a division of Golden Rain Foundation, is Mutual Operations Division, and that is the property management division for Golden Rain Foundation. MOD provides property management services to 22 of the mutuals on a nonprofit directed basis. So Mutual Operations reports directly to each of the board of directors for the mutuals, and they set the level of service that they would like to receive from MOD. So three distinct kind of divisions, two of them tied together, but all intertwined in delivering services to the residents of Rossmore. So we have some questions that we received ahead of time that we'll answer, and then we'll unmute people on Zoom, and you're free then to ask a question, and we'll do our best to answer it. If we don't have an answer, we'll get back to you, and this will be played and published again, so hopefully others will be able to see it. With that, Joy, do we have?
Yes, we have a few questions from Mary Ann Clark. The first one is, what can we do to stop the practice of the excessive pruning of the olive trees by Warrener?
Okay, we have John here with us.
Yes, I'll obviously take that one. So every tree is going to be different. With olives specifically, we really have only done sort of excessive pruning on them along Rossmore Parkway and in some other areas within GRF. The main reason we do that is because they're fruiting olives. We're trying to reduce the amount of fruit that they drop. So we've done some hard cutbacks on them in the past in order to make less of a maintenance issue with the dropping of those olives.
All right. The second question is, how can we stop the practice of lollipopping trees? This should not be standard practice by Warrener.
We could talk about that just in general. It's going to be different with every single tree we have in the community. We don't want them to lollipop anything. Obviously, if there's been a situation, please get in contact with me or MOD through the work order desk, and we'll look at what specific tree you had in question. And we have a lot of trees that are in inappropriate locations. They weren't the correct species that was planted in that spot way long ago. So there'll be certain times where we have to cut trees in a way that we wouldn't like to, but in order to keep them clear from hitting the buildings or keep them clear over roadways, items like that, sometimes it's necessary to do.
As somebody that is not a arborist, what in the world is lollipopping a tree?
I think the general term is making it into a perfect ball.
That's not a technical term?
Not a technical term. Yeah, no, I know arborists would use that terminology, but it's very clear when you see it. It almost looks too perfect rather than keeping the tree in a more natural shape.
Got it.
Which leads to the next question, which is what can we do to allow a more natural growth of plants as opposed to hard pruning?
The biggest thing is correct plant choice and tree choice. That's something we're focused on moving forward, making sure the right plant is in the right spot. In all maintenance contracts with all the mutuals, both contractors, Brightview and Terra, they are required to naturally prune. It's written in there. So we need to hold them to those standards. And, there's sometimes, like I said, where it's kind of impossible because you have to prune it away from a sidewalk or a road. But, we can pick better plants in the future to prevent that from happening.
So you just did a really nice presentation on trees to the GRF board, which I believe is on our YouTube channel that people can see. But you talked a lot about tree selection and native and non-native and trees that you would like to see continue here and those that should be phased out.
Yep.
So if you get a chance to see that, you can go to our YouTube channel, I believe. Should be on there.
All right. Next question is, what is the process for stopping the use of Roundup in Rossmore?
So that's a difficult question. It's up to the mutuals to decide how, if they want to go organic, they can require the contractors to use certain chemicals. It's not a GRF decision to do that within the mutuals. They have to come to that decision on their own. It's usually an increase in the contract there, and we can set that up through my department. GRF does not use Roundup around any of the clubhouses. We use other traditional pesticides, but we are no longer using it.
Are there any online questions?
Not as of now.
Oh, come on. This is an interactive, so feel free to raise your hand if you have a question that you'd like to ask the panel here. Anything to do with MOD?
Okay. Until then, I've got one more question.
Okay.
How can we permanently stop the consideration of selling the Gardens Club space to Trellis or anyone else?
So I don't believe that is a MOD question, but the board did at their last meeting take off from further consideration the land use study. And again, it was a informational study. It was not a proposal to sell any land or develop any land. It was a study to develop information. With proper information, better decisions can always be made. But at this point in time, the board did vote to take that off of further consideration.
Okay. And we have Mary Ann online with a question. So you can unmute yourself.
Hey, welcome, Mary Ann.
Following up on the Roundup, what chemicals are you using around the clubhouse instead of Roundup?
In a lot of cases, we use Garlon. That's been used quite a bit. We use something else called Prosecutor. We don't really use very much of it. Those are the two main ones that we use.
Thanks.
Okay, and a question just came in on the chat, which is, can you explain the huge increase in fees being levied through the Recreation Department? When will this be made public?
So again, today we're trying to focus on mutual operations division through recreation. Certainly if you have a question specific, it'd be best to contact Ann Matola or Kelsey Klima in that department and ask those specific questions. There will be further discussions in relation to room reservations certainly coming up. That is still an area that is under review.
Okay. And here's another. How do we form a citizens landscape committee that could work with John?
I'm not really sure how this would work, but some of the mutual landscape chairs have gotten together recently to discuss having a committee just to talk with each other, to sort of understand how landscaping works in Rossmore. It'd be good for any new landscape reps to come through. I would be preparing some presentations for that group. It's hopefully something I can get started within this next year to actually have landscape reps meet each other, understand what we're trying to do in Rossmore in general, and so that way people can be more informed going forward.
But each mutual has a landscape committee, correct?
Correct.
How do those committees interact with you now, or how do those committees work?
It's all pretty much on an individual basis. Each one of them works with me and my two supervisors, and then Lisa Langford, the landscape coordinator. Depending on what the issue is, it can get solved through the work order desk, or through email with one of us. It's a lot of back and forth, but every mutual is making their own decisions, but the majority of them are in line with each other.
All right. And another email question is, as the climate gets hotter and drier, researchers are finding that the range in distribution of plant species is changing in California and elsewhere. What principles are guiding the long-range planning for tree planting and preservation in Rossmore? And what is the tree replacement policy?
This is the John.
Yeah, I know. I'll first start with the Rossmore policy. There's no requirement by the city at all to do this, but when we remove a tree, we always try to plant another tree. It's not always going to be in the same location, and we want to pick an appropriate species for that spot. Usually when we're removing a tree, it's because it wasn't an appropriate species. So a lot of times we're replacing it in the same location, sometimes in another, but that's just kind of a Rossmore policy that we've adopted over the years. Moving forward, there's a lot of species that will work here, don't work here. We want to focus on things that are low water, low maintenance. I am working on a new list to be posted on the Rossmore website. It should be coming very soon, and I'll refer people to that in the future.
Okay. And another landscaping question. There's actually two. So the first is it possible for residents to receive a yearly calendar from landscaping per street as to when mulching, pesticide spraying, pruning, leaves removal will be scheduled?
The individual contractors have schedules. Each entry gets served once per month as they work through them. So it's not always perfect on the day that they're going to be there, but know that your entry will get serviced at least once a month. We have a general horticultural calendar of different things we go through the year doing. I'm happy to provide those to people. When it comes to actual spraying of chemicals, in Rossmore we only spray on Tuesdays and Thursdays before noon. We don't provide any details of where we're going to be that day. But just know when you're walking around, if you see the blue indicator dye on the ground, that means there was just some spraying done during that day.
Okay. And your last question for now. Why are high trafficked areas worked on more frequently than others?
I think that's just kind of a general thing in landscaping. The areas that people see the most are usually the areas that contractors focus on the most. If we have any issues in any of your entries and you think something needs to be done, please either call or email the work order desk, and we'll get some maintenance crews out there to take care of it.
Okay. And now a resale question. Do real estate or flippers pay the transfer fee? If not, why not?
Go ahead.
Flippers do pay the membership transfer fee. They have a window. Well, normally they pay it on the first unit or the first property that they purchase in Rossmore. After that, if they end up selling that, they have 120 days from that close of escrow from that last unit before they can claim exemption. If they miss that window, they have to pay the membership transfer fee.
And if they own multiple units, they only pay it once, correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
And that's because you can't be a member twice?
That's correct.
Only be a member once.
Thank you.
Okay, back to you, John. When will the landscaping department start mowing back the grass around the mutuals?
For the fire breaking. That's going to start happening next month. We have to wait for it to get a little bit drier to do that work. If we cut it back now, it'll just grow right back. But you should see landscape crews in May working on those fire breaks.
Okay, and one more question. Do you have plans to remove liquid amber trees?
If the tree is diseased at all, yes. If it's causing any damage to structures, yes, we will remove it. But if it's a completely healthy tree, even though it drops those gumballs that everyone doesn't like, the city will not grant us permits for those trees. I've gone through it in several cases, and they want to protect those trees. I know they can make a mess, but the landscape crews know to regularly service under those trees and to get rid of those gumballs on the sidewalks.
Right. There are no further questions at this time.
So Todd, you've been here for just a short time,
Yes.
but quickly getting your feet wet. I know one of the main things you've been diving into is coordination of the audits and studies for the various mutuals. Can you give an update on that process?
Absolutely. Yeah, so everyone, I'm very excited to be here. As I said at the board meeting on last Thursday. So one of the obviously key, I would say, if you look at an annual calendar, some of the key things that we owe the mutuals are the completion of their audits. And that task, as I stepped into this role, we are, I'd like to say, we're really close. We're almost done with all of them here coming up in May, probably by May 15th. So we are actively engaged in all that, and obviously as a best practice and a service, I truly believe that the mutuals are our customers, and that we deserve and owe them best practices and access to all the information, and certainly in the finance and accounting world. So I'm very excited to be a part of that team and have some of that full disclosure going forward. There's an interesting thing that I was speaking to one of the mutual presidents, was, one of the just functional things that the CFO task takes on is becoming the assistant treasurer on the boards. And I think there is a operational efficiency for that in terms of how we actually manage payments and managing the actual transactions within the individual mutuals. But the other side of that hat is I'm also the assistant treasurer on all these mutuals. So all the mutuals concerns are also my concern from a fiduciary duty. So I got to wear two hats. One of those hats is the audits. So as an assistant treasurer going forward on the mutual, obviously my concern is also looking over the financial health of the mutuals and looking forward to making sure those things are done, because I've accepted a role on the board of directors of these mutuals. So it's not just the Golden Rain Mod side that I'm responsible for. I'm also responsible for being on these individual boards and making sure that they're served correctly. And so as we move forward, you're gonna find a very open door and a very open office with me, and a lot more communication from my group. So, and I will be updating and getting the audits out here in the next couple of weeks. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. Okay. So, Sophia, if I call the work order desk, how do we know if something is paid for by the mutual or has to be paid for by a resident? What's mutual responsibility compared to a resident responsibility?
So I can walk you through step by step on what happens first. When we do get a call at the work order desk, we have 6 agents that answer the call. We always ask for the address. So while we're looking up their address and listening to the caller, we listen to what their request is. So if for any reason, let's say for example, it's a light bulb needs to be replaced. So that usually is a struggle for a lot, especially if it's somewhere high. They would want somebody to come out and replace that. So we would explain to the caller that that's not something that's covered under their mutual. That actually goes all across most mutuals. If it's inside their unit that they control, that's not covered. So we would then advise the caller at the time that that's not covered under your mutual. However, the plus side is if they happen to sign up for the Golden Rain Handyman service, we look that up under address and our system tells us that they have it. We could let them know that that is a service that we cover under that service, under handyman. If for any reason they don't have that handyman service, we would let them know that that's not a service we cover, that they would have to either ask somebody else to do it, or if they don't have anyone available, we can offer it as a resident billable service. So we would schedule a technician to come out and do that. And the resident would have to pay for that at the time when they leave.
Okay. So we've all talked a lot about insurance and the impact. What have you been seeing in terms of sales in Rossmore with the member records?
What I've been seeing a lot lately is we are getting a lot of cash buyers. But also we do still get requests from a lot of lenders out there requesting, we go through questionnaires. So I believe these lenders are asking for specific questions to see if they can find a lender for a buyer. So we do still get those questions, and I from what I understand, there are still some providing loans to these buyers.
So Rossmore has co-ops, condos, and single-family homes even. Can you what's the difference between a co-op and a condo, and what kind of services are provided?
Oh, that's a good one. So co-ops, it's actually half of our units here. There's 3,000 plus co-ops in Rossmore. So the difference with that is there's a lot more covered under their policy. We're talking about what's covered if they wanted something, let's say appliances. Most appliances are covered under the co-ops. In condos, they're not. Condos, a lot of them, they're responsible for a lot of the maintenance inside of their manor. And same for the single family homes.
Okay.
We have 2 questions.
2 questions, all right.
Yes. So, Marianne, you can unmute yourself.
I would like to know if something can be done about preventing golf carts from being driven on the lawns of the Dollar House and the Dollar Park. I see them quite often.
Any thought on that one?
Well, we have put that new fence up around the oak tree there, which is a good deterrent for those golf carts. We have no restrictions on golf carts being in that area. If there continues to be problems, maybe we think about changing some of those items, but currently there's no restriction on them being able to drive their golf carts on the lawn area.
Do we really have issues with golf carts on turf if they're driving?
Not typically on turf, no.
I mean, I think that's what they do on the golf course, isn't it? Well, maybe.
But there are also trees growing there.
But yeah, as you mentioned, there is some new fencing to protect the trees that are impacted.
Yep.
Okay. A question?
All right. Can Todd comment on the current status of NetSuite?
NetSuite?
I would love to comment on the current status of NetSuites. So one of the things that I bring to this organization is my past experience in implementing new enterprise resource planning tools like NetSuite. The Golden Rain and all the mutuals, we've all been existing in this pretty archaic GenArc legacy system. And so there's a tremendous improvements and a real reason to move into a new modern ERP system. And that includes a lot of reporting capabilities, streamlining what we do in accounting, streamlining how the actual processes for everything from maintenance works through the system. Where we are right now in terms of status, we are actually looking at a new go live date for January 1st. A lot of reasons for that. The biggest one being it's the cutoff between our fiscal years. There's only a few mutuals, like 39, that have March fiscal year ends, but for the most part, 95% of our entities all cut over in the year. So it makes a lot of sense to do a clean cutoff at the end of the year. It allows us to do a lot of testing and training that is what's required and when you move into a system of this magnitude. So there's a lot of work to be done to get to that January 1st update, but we also want to be able to deliver a level of customer service that doesn't, suffer because of a artificial implementation schedule. So this allows us to do and continue to deliver what accounting needs to do from a compliance standpoint, also for better information for the mutuals and for Golden Rain. So there's just a lot of benefits to that new cutover date. The other thing that I think is the best way to say, this is one of those things that when you implement a system like this, you really want to make sure 90+% of it is done right the first time. They're not as easily customizable on the back end. But one of the things that we're really going to be able to see going forward once we get into NetSuite environment is we're going to be able to do a lot more of what I consider the financial planning and analysis work. We're going to be able to do and share a lot more key metrics with the mutual boards in terms of the financial health. So there's a lot of positives going forward for this organization and all the residents to benefit from NetSuite, and so obviously we want to do it right and we don't want to rush it. So, but we are, I think, in a good place here for January 1. It makes all the sense in the world, and anytime anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to go over the NetSuite implementation, and we'll be sharing not just the schedule, but we're also going to be sharing at the next board meeting the accounting of the NetSuite implementation as well, and allowing some full transparency on where we are to the budget and the cost, and hopefully some very exciting news as we hit some of these key milestones. When we start bringing the real data over from GenArc and start testing those trial balances, not to bore everyone, but it's going to be pretty exciting for this organization. I've had the benefit of seeing the numerous times when an organization gets to the other side of these implementations, and the level of service and access to data is remarkable, and obviously it's super critical cornerstone in the future of Golden Rain and how we manage all the mutuals. So
we are all looking forward to that definite implementation.
Yeah.
And we have one more question. Is it not true that appliances are not covered if they have been replaced by a resident during a remodel?
That's a great question, and that is correct. If it has been altered during remodel, then that appliance will not be covered under the mutual's policy. So most of the time, if we do get requests, and sometimes we don't always know when we get the call at the work order desk that it's an alteration. When the technician gets there, then we'll advise the resident that this is not original. Unfortunately, we can't do the repair or do anything with it, unfortunately.
So the reason for that is if somebody replaces something with a much higher end model, and then asks the mutual to replace that higher end model than what they would replace on a standard level, then everybody in the mutual is paying for a higher end model for somebody, right?
That is correct.
So,
No more questions.
so let's talk a little bit about the trust agreement. I wrote about this in my general manager's report in the last week's newspaper. And it's a important founding document for Rossmore and Golden Rain Foundation and the mutuals. The trust agreement really is what sets the foundation for Golden Rain Foundation to exist as trustee of the Golden Rain Foundation Trust. As trustee, Golden Rain Foundation is able to collect the fees necessary to operate. It allows Golden Rain Foundation to deliver all of the services that really make Rossmore the active adult community that it is. And that includes, the golf courses, the recreation programs, counseling services, fitness center, all of those amenities and programs and services and new facilities and renovation of facilities that occurs is because of the trust agreement that really lays the foundation for GRF being able to exist, to provide goods, to provide services, amenities to the mutuals and their members. The reason I wrote about it this last week is the original agreement expired 60 years after it was created, and that would have been this month of 2024. And thankfully, the agreement had a provision tied to a individual that as long as they are alive, it extends 21 years beyond their death. So back in 2013, one of those individuals was identified and signed an affidavit proving that they were alive. And so the agreement was extended at that point to 2034. But this is a critical document, and it does need to be extended, because if Golden Rain didn't exist, we wouldn't have all of these wonderful amenities and services that are provided for the benefit of the mutuals and their residents. So one of the things you'll hear about in the coming years is an effort to extend the life of that trust agreement. I want to distinguish that between the trust agreement and the management agreement. One of our functions that Golden Rain has is providing property management services to the mutuals through MOD, Mutual Operations Division. And there is a management agreement between each mutual and Golden Rain Foundation to provide those management services to the mutuals. It's very separate from what Golden Rain Foundation does under the trust agreement. So the management agreement covers everything from the services provided by MOD in terms of building maintenance, in terms of finance, in terms of landscaping, that is the level of service directed by the mutual. So there's a number of things that are provided under the management agreement, but very separate from Golden Rain Foundation under the terms of the trust. Two different documents, but all very important to how Rossmore operates.
And now we have a question on rat prevention. The current method seems very passive, and just putting out bait boxes doesn't seem to be working. Is there a more active method that can be implemented?
So,
What do you know about rats?
yeah, it's going to depend on your mutual how we handle some pest issues. There's a little bit different here and there. On my staff, I have one pest control tech. He services a lot of areas. In other mutuals, they have contractors like Antex that does the work. When a resident calls in about a rat issue, we send out one of the techs, and they usually put out the bait stations. They continually check those to make sure they have actual bait in them. Sometimes there's certain situations where we had to bring in some higher level service than that that would be up to your mutual boards to decide if they want to do that. But I know some mutuals have gone with that. We have a company come out and do a much more detailed inspection of the whole building. But you'd have to work through your mutual to get that done.
That was my question.
Jesus, sorry.
Can I unmute?
Yep,
Yeah,
go ahead.
that-
We can hear you.
That was, it says I'm muted.
We can hear you.
Okay. So I think the bait boxes attract the rats. And because in my open carport thing, all 6 people have had evidence of rats, and we've had a bait box there for 2.5 years. I had $5,500 worth of rat damage in my engine. And I have things making noises and peppermint oil and everything, and the bait box. The bait box was sitting there for 2 years while they ate my engine. So I think the bait box is the wrong approach. It draws them there to eat the stuff, and I'm afraid to. I'm not parking my car in my carport because I'm so afraid to get more damage to my car. So what more can be done? Can anybody come out and do more than this?
You are correct. Yes, the bait boxes do attract the rats. There's certain scents in there that get them to come actually eat the poison. There are other ways. MOD doesn't offer a higher level of service to do that, so we need to work with your mutual to potentially get someone else out there to help serve that. But you know, I would encourage you to continue to contact Lisa Langford, landscape coordinator. She'll work with you to make sure that the bait stations are still fully stocked, and then maybe
No, the bait station was there the whole time while they were eating my thing. It didn't work at all.
I don't know your specific situation, but we can if you provide your address to Lisa again, we'll work together to find a solution.
So, John, I hear you say quite a bit that that is a decision or direction of the mutual. Mm-hmm. So, can you explain a little bit, or others weigh in a little bit too, on how decisions are made and the importance of understanding that individual mutual boards really have a lot of direction and say over the level of service that is received and provided, and they're considering at all times costs and benefit to residents and so forth. But it's not just MOD and our various departments making these decisions. It falls more under the board, and you both can speak to that probably. A lot of what we do is really directed by the mutual and their decisions on level of service, correct?
Correct. You know, just continuing with that same sort of issue, what I first said earlier was, you know, there's certain policies and procedures, you know, within each mutual, and those are obviously differing from one to another. You know, there's lots of different ways we can handle a problem within your budgets. There's in landscape, there's a contracted services line item. Within that contracted services is pest control, and we do a certain variety of things like putting out the bait stations. There's certain things like we won't clean up the actual feces from any of the animals. You know, if there's wasps, we don't handle that in-house typically. We have a contractor to come out and do that as well. So there's many different ways to go about it, and you know, we take the direction from the board.
Sophia, you have anything to add from your department in terms of?
Nothing really. Just we go by the direction of the board, what they approve. We can't just create a work order, send somebody out, and it ends up being more than the cost, more than what the mutual is aware of, and so then it becomes an issue. So we want to prevent that. So we have to follow what they guide us or what they allow us to kind of work they allow us to do.
So Todd, we talk about mutual operations division being a nonprofit property management division. In other words, we're not like an independent management company that also has a bottom line that they're trying to provide a profit to their organization, their business.
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about what that means to provide property management services on a nonprofit basis, and what happens at the end of the year if there happens to be a surplus.
Yeah, so Jeff, you're absolutely correct. So, the mutual operations, and I think this is where, when you originally started speaking about the different buckets, for lack of a better word, when you have the Golden Round Foundation, you have the MOD, and you have the actual trust itself. The mutual operations department is an allocated level of management services that go across all the mutuals. And so our directive as a nonprofit is to provide those services, take in what we need to take in to basically, it's almost like if you're doing your, I like to talk about when people are doing their taxes, right? You really don't want a refund, right? Because that means the government's been holding your money and you're not getting any interest on it. So you want to basically be break even, or you actually want to owe a little. That's better use of your funds. So if you think kind of like as MOD, as we set those MOD budgets, obviously to the best of our ability, they're never going to be 100%. That's why they're budgets. But as we work through the year and we start looking at where those variances might be either over or under, we will make adjustments, and ultimately we'll pay back mutuals if we have a need to at the end of the year. So
Like too much.
yeah, and so I think for the the finance and financial operations of MOD, we obviously have our fiduciary duty to report that information back to all the mutual boards. Like I indicated earlier, is that I'm going to be sitting on these boards as well as assistant treasurers to make sure that those charges are that there isn't being a profit generated, and that accountability, and that's also why we go through the audits and we look at the MOD charges, that it's all, that's the fiduciary duty. So it's all above board, and that we are actually providing these services at cost, basically, so we break even.
Right.
Okay, we have an online question.
All right.
Richard, you can unmute yourself.
Hi. Hello, John. This is a question, some comments and questions for you. So, can you hear me? Because my screen is frozen.
We can still hear you.
You can hear me. Okay.
Yes.
So John, I have a kind of a big picture question for you. So I'm a landscape architect, as some of you know, and there's many of us in the landscape community here that have a variety of questions that we don't know how to bring up because we think they require discussion and and a back and forth. So I'd like to give you, and they relate to landscape best practices and sustainable landscape practices. So I'd like to give you a couple of examples, and then I'll ask my question. So things that I've observed, that new plants soon to be installed around without regard to their size, how big they will grow. So pruning is required. In other words, a 7-foot wide plant is put 2 feet away from a curb. So that means the plant will require pruning for the next 30 years, which is costly. Most plants that I see around in our community are pruned whether they need it or not. So this is costly. For example, many of the plants can be allowed to grow their full size. So we'd like to encourage more sustainable landscape practices, and we'd like to have a discussion or conversation about how more of these can be implemented. We have other examples that we can give you. And my last thing that I observed yesterday, I was visiting someone on Rockledge and noticed a new landscape that was put on a hillside along the street where there are liquid ambers and deodar cedars planted on the slope. And when they grow, they will block the views of the manors at the top of the slope. So a lot of the questions we have are not like things that require a simple answer, but things that we feel like, what are some solutions here? How can we discuss things You're very busy. We don't want to keep emailing our little questions to you. So it's kind of a big picture question that I'm asking.
So there's a lot to unpack there,
Not to put you
Richard.
on the spot.
Yes.
But a lot of the things you're saying, I wholeheartedly agree with. I don't know the specifics of that one scenario you mentioned. We are trying to plant things in the appropriate location and thinking about the full size once they're fully mature. I could point to a lot of places where I think we've done that over the past few years. I'm hoping I don't think we've planted a liquid amber anywhere since I've been here, so I don't know exactly where that one scenario you're talking about is. I go back to earlier when I mentioned having the landscape chairs interact with each other in some sort of forum where we can talk to them and keep everyone on the same page. I think that's a good way going forward to make sure everyone within Rossmore, all of the mutuals are moving in the right direction when it comes to landscaping.
So those of us that are not on landscape, and by the way, the liquid amber have their original labels still on them. So that's because I couldn't believe that they were being planted. So, so some of us, such as me, are not part of landscape committees. As you know, I educate about landscaping here in the community. I would like to be able to, when I give classes and point things out to people, I like to be able to give them explanations as I point things out. I'd like to know how to advise people on how different topics can be addressed. And so I think I'm asking a question I believe that you can't answer, that can't be answered without maybe some more thought or conversation, because it's kind of a big picture thing. There's no easy way to ask questions that don't have yes or no answers, or we'll take a look at it. So I'll just kind of leave it at that, and maybe I can pick up with you later.
So that kind of brings up a good topic, though, to expand on a little bit. And one is on the importance of volunteers. I like to say that Rossmore and the Mutuals, Golden Rain Foundation, is 100% reliant on resident volunteers, whether that is for mutual boards, landscape committees, building committees, finance committees. It is so vital that people, especially people with expertise, join in their mutuals' various committees, whether it's the board or one of the other committees, so they really have an opportunity to share that expertise and vote on items and make a difference. One of the challenges for every mutual board and for Golden Rain Foundation board and committees is always trying to balance the various interests. This, I think you all would probably agree, there is a varying opposite opinion for just about everything that we do, everything that the mutuals boards would decide on, and as either an employee or as a volunteer on one of those committees, trying to balance various interests is extremely challenging, whether it is balancing expense for taking on a certain project or item, whether it is certain people's preference for various landscaping, you can go on and on and on. So if you want to make a difference, it is vital that people volunteer. It's the only way this community would continue to thrive is with volunteers. But also for those people that are volunteering, always keep in mind that they are trying to balance a lot of different interests. I say when I first started here, there was one call about the pool has to be hotter, has to be warmer. Same day, the pool is just too hot. A room reservation, always the same. Too hot, too cold. So it is definitely trying to find a balance. I know, John, you deal with that with a lot of different preferences for how landscaping should be done or whatnot. I encourage people to take their time to volunteer. It's great. Any more questions?
Yeah, we have a question from Leila McCullough. You
Great.
can unmute yourself.
Yes. Thank you. I had asked.
Oh, we lost your sound there. We can't hear you.
Okay.
There you go.
Am I unmuted now? Yes. I had asked the question about the range and distribution of plant species. Research shows that the plants are migrating northward now. The valley oaks and the blue oaks are in decline in California. And our tree planting and preservation committee wants to do an acorn planting project in the fall. But I don't think we can go now and plant valley oaks and blue oaks because of what the research is showing. And we're trying to think about all of this and get your thoughts, how you're thinking about, especially the planting of oaks and preservation of oaks. I mean, it's a very complex issue.
Yeah, I feel like we could go on about this one for a while, but we are definitely trying to protect all of our heritage oak trees, obviously.
John, you're muted.
We're
I can't hear.
Can you hear us now?
No, well, it sounds.
Go ahead. We're told that we're
I
live.
can't hear you.
Okay, it must be on your end.
I think we're all
So
muted. Except
Go ahead
me.
and
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
When it comes to tree planting, like I said, I'm going to come up with another species list very soon. There'll be some of those oak trees. I mean, California buckeye will be on that list, for example. I still have been planting coast live oaks in a lot of scenarios here recently. I'd have to look a little bit more into the research document you have provided to actually give a full response on this, though.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
We have one more question from Mary Ann Clark. You can unmute yourself.
I have a lot of questions. Sorry about that. I was just looking up prosecutor, the pesticide. It's it's 41% of the ingredient is glyphosate. So I'm wondering if that really is organic.
I did not say it was organic. It is a traditional herbicide.
Okay.
Any other questions?
We have one from Jean Chu. You can unmute yourself.
Jean? Are you there? Not responding.
All right, and that was it for now, unless she comes back.
Okay. Well, I hope that folks have found this helpful, and certainly we only covered a small portion. There's building maintenance division, there's resales and alterations. There is a lot that goes on up at MOD. Certainly, if you do have questions for this group or for others, we would love to hear from you. And we'll try and be as responsive as possible. This program will air again, so if those that wanted to see it or participate, if you come up with a question after seeing it, certainly shoot us an email. That would be fantastic. We'll try and be responsive. Yep. If there's any other questions?
No, Jean, actually, she sent in a recommendation.
Excellent. Go ahead.
Okay. I recommend MOD phase out cleaning products that contain artificial fragrance, which contains carcinogenic and allergenic chemicals. For example, people are dancing and doing breathing exercises in Hillside, and the soap in the bathrooms consist of very unpleasant and unhealthy ingredients. This is not good for people using the facility. There are natural products out there.
We will pass that comment along to our custodial division. who takes care of the clubhouse amenities. Well, I'd like to thank my colleagues here that joined today, especially at the last minute. And John, you got a lot of questions there. That was good. And welcome to Todd. I hope you'll have a long and prosperous career here with Golden Rain Foundation.
I will, and I'm planning on the finance and accounting town hall too, once I get a little bit more under my belt here.
Excellent. And Sophia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.